Erstklassisch mit Mischke, der musikalische Podcast des Hamburger Abendblatts.
Schönen guten Tag zu einer neuen Folge. Ausnahmsweise bin ich mal nicht in meinem Arbeitszimmer, sondern im Hotel 4 Jahreszeiten, weil ich einen Pianisten treffe, der heute Abend ein Konzert hier in Hamburg hat, relativ überraschend für ihn. Er springt ein für Martha Argerich bei dem Konzert von Antonio Pappano und dem Santa Cecilia. Wir haben uns vor kurzem durch Zufall in der Leishalle getroffen und uns verabredet. Wir haben das erste Mal vor ein paar Jahren schon miteinander gesprochen und jetzt tun wir das wieder, was mich sehr freut. Und es ist wenig überraschend, wenn ich sage, dass er aus Island kommt, dass dann klar wird, wer es ist. Das ist nämlich Víkingur Ólafsson. Und ich freue mich sehr, dass das hier klappt. So, I have no idea what guten Tag means in Icelandic, but hello.
Góðan daginn. Guten
Okay.
Tag.
Thank you.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah, pretty much. Wir haben uns überlegt, eine Art von Wegführung für dieses Gespräch und wir drehen uns immer um ein Thema hier und das Thema für heute soll das Wort oder das Thema Spielen sein. So, for this talk I've picked playing as the main subject and we'll see where we'll end. But first of all, I want to ask maybe a kind of easy question, but maybe even silly. But is it okay actually to talk about playing the piano? Because doing that is so much work when you're earnest, and it's so much work first and the fun comes later, hopefully. So how do you see this? Is it actually playing or working the piano?
I think the fun comes first actually, and then the work, and then the fun, and then the work, and it goes on in a spiral like that. But you know, when I think of playing the piano, it's very interesting to remember, you know, the first experience of playing the piano, and at least trying to remember it, and if not for yourself, to see it in your children. I have 2 boys who are 1 and 3, and I have a few pianos. It's my weakness. I have too many instruments, but I keep one grand piano, a very old Steinway, in the dining room right next to the dining table. So it's not my finest piano, but it's a beautiful old piano. But I allow my 3-year-old to play it whenever he wants and however he likes to play it. So there are no rules except no food on the piano, clean hands, you know, that's it. And preferably play with your fingers as opposed to any other part of your body.
Foot,
yes,
head.
exactly. But I still, you know, if he does it softly, I have allowed him to play with his toes, you know. And this is okay. But seeing that kind of freedom around what is my working instrument and working tool, the piano, is also very inspiring for me. And to see how he plays the piano and the kind of sense of discovery that he has with the simple mechanics of the piano. And I try to explain to him what happens when he pushes a key on the piano and how, you know, the key goes inside, you know, behind the lid of the piano and becomes the hammer, which then hits the string, which then creates the sound with, you know, everything. And he's trying to understand it. Of course he can't. And for him, it's a magic machine. So when I play the piano, sometimes I try to forget the rules a little bit, like, you know, all the rules that we are taught from the age of whatever, 5 or 6 when we start having piano lessons, and try to approach it a little bit like he approaches it, you know, to try to find a new way to the piano. And that you cannot do with a normal mind frame of working. You can only do that by playing with the instruments. It was the same sensation I saw with my smaller boy, who was 1.5. So last summer, we went into the garden, and you know, I realized he was having the sensation for grass for the very first time in his life. You know, the very first time the snow melted and we went outside, because he was born sort of, you know, in the winter then before, and then just feeling of grass. And then he saw a daffodil, the flower, you know, and he took it up and he looked at it, started plucking it and smelling it, and I just thought, wow, if we could, in adulthood, if we could have that sensation for the world again, if we could have that sensation for music again. And then I realized that it's actually, of course, impossible to discover a daffodil when you're in your 30s, but you can keep that playful energy when you discover rediscover music of the past.
But I mean, you're a professional piano player, so it is your job, and sometimes I guess it really doesn't feel like playing. It's a job. You have an obligation. You have to be somewhere in time. You have to play a certain piece, hopefully more or less in the right direction. And so there's obligations and there's pressure in a way. So what does this make of the idea of playing music?
Everything you say is true. There is pressure, there is schedule, there is relentless work, actually. And I read somewhere that I was the 4th busiest pianist in the world last year.
Oops.
I'm not sure it's a good thing because I also have 2 children, as I've said, and it's difficult to get it all to work together. But I think once you reach a state of taking it all for granted, maybe you need to take a break. I'm still at a stage in my life and career where I'm still just fascinated with simply playing with the best orchestras. It still almost surprises me because 10 years ago that was still a distant dream. So just going with the Berlin Philharmonic or whatever orchestra Concertgebouw and just getting to play with these people on those stages, the music that I love more than anything else, that still has that kind of sense of discovery for me. It has a playfulness to it, so that I'm still kind of young enough, I guess, to not just be tired of it and take it for granted and think, oh, another week with this orchestra. But once that stops to be the case, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and consider if you should maybe take some time off. There has to be that feeling of gratitude for getting to do it. But how do you keep that sense of playfulness? I think, everybody is different. I remember Sviatoslav Richter saying, the Russian pianist, saying that he could only play a recital program like 3 times or something like that, and then he needed to change the repertoire and play something else to sort of amuse himself, And then there are others like Grigory Sokolov, equally great Russian pianist, who loves to play the same recital program for maybe a year without changing it. So you have to find out what keeps you amused. You can be amused by constantly going through new repertoire, or you can be amused by challenging yourself to always find a new perspective on the same object, like a great painter doing a setup, painting a bowl of fruit.
But is there time on stage to feel amused? Being amused sounds to me like something you do in your pastime when you have nothing left, nothing else to do, when you're free to pick whatever you want. And it's like, I can enjoy this, or I can just stop it and leave and do something else. I mean, you can't. This feeling on a stage might be sort of hard to get, like it's feeling completely relaxed and completely tense in the same moment.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that is the kind of struggle of all art in general. It's the balance between freedom and discipline, and you cannot be without one or the other if you want to create something of some meaning. I think that, the greatest works of art, like, let's say the works of Johann Sebastian Bach in music, they have both. They are the most perfect structures, mathematically, if you wish, or musicologically. They're unbelievable. But at the same time, they're not that. They are poetry. Every piece of Bach, every movement of Bach is a poem in itself. And those things have to go together. It's a little bit like, it's so uninteresting to see someone who only has practiced 6 hours a day for 30 years and is incredibly good at his or her instrument, but doesn't have the fantasy and the freedom of letting go of that. At the same time, there's nothing worse than seeing someone who is only free and doesn't have the discipline to hone his or her skill. So that is the question, and how do you treat a concert? Is it a working environment, or is it perhaps a platform for art? Something completely different, because art isn't really office, But of course, if you travel and you play 80, 90, 100, whatever many concerts a year, the danger is that it starts to feel like an office. It's just another concert, another city, another. Let's do this. Let's just produce this event here. But that's not what I want to do. My mother is very romantic. She was a pianist, and she's a piano teacher. She doesn't play anymore publicly, but she always spoke to me in a very romantic way of every concert as having the potential to be life-changing experience, like transforming. And a concert was sort of a sacred occasion almost, It's not something you just do. It's something that you allow to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's always stayed with me, and that you have to sort of expect of yourself that every concert could potentially be, and should potentially be your best performance ever, Mm-hmm. Because if you just go into the routine of producing all these concerts with a different mindset, it does have to become an office because there are just too many of those events, Mm. And that is the challenge, to keep that attitude that it can and should potentially be life-changing.
Mm. Since you mentioned your collection of instruments, how many do you have, by the way?
Sorry. Well, currently there are 3 grand pianos. There's one square piano from the 18th century, sort of 1785 is the year of my oldest piano. And I have a 5th one, which is an electronic piano, a Clavier, which I bought when I had neighbors who were going crazy. Now I have a house, I had neighbors who were going crazy. So, and I actually, rather liked working when I had to work very late night, which sometimes happens. I rather liked just sort of putting the volume down and doing my simple work on the Clavier, but certainly not for poetry or inspiration.
But you're lucky. I mean, your wife is a piano player as well, so you have the best excuse to carry all these instruments in your home.
It's a bit embarrassing. I mean, we're very lucky. We have a beautiful house, but we are expanding the house this year, and I kind of more for the pianos than for the family. It's a little bit funny.
Do you have a favorite instrument or the favorite sound of an instrument? Like, because on your last record you used a grand piano and you used a normal upright piano. So is there a difference in your taste that do you have a preference? Like, I need to do certain things on the grand piano. It's okay if there's just an upright, or doesn't it matter at all? Because as long as you're playing, you're good.
As long as I'm playing, I'm good. That's the simple answer. Which is not to say that these machines are equal the greatest piano, the Steinway D, if it's well maintained with a great technician, mind you. You can't say that a Steinway D is automatically great. You need a fantastic piano technician to realize its full potential. Nothing replaces that, but it doesn't mean that it's the right vehicle for every type of expression. So for my last album, which had a lot of miniatures, including by Georgi Kurtag, he actually writes some of these for pianino, as he calls it, which is just small upright piano with a super, what is it called? With a permanent soft pedal down. That's what he intends the music for. And some of the music, like one of my favorite pieces, which is called Sleepily, or Schlafend or something, that is really better on the upright piano, and even just an old cheap upright piano with a super pedal, when you're doing these slow glissandos, which are supposed to symbolize yawning, that's the effect that he wants to get. And then he has these tone clusters, and when you play them if you compare the 2 recordings, because I also recorded it on a Steinway, I just much prefer it on the more imperfect instrument, because that is the expression of it. It becomes more human, it becomes more schlafend. So I don't think you can, you can't be so simple to think that the same brush will work for every type of painting, But there are still, the beautiful thing about the Steinway D is that with the right technician you can still have unbelievable variety of colors, but then you also have to allow that to happen by approaching it with sort of Spielfreude, to allow it to be, to find your inner child is to find new sounds,
Do you see yourself as a grown-up actually, because you can do what many grown-ups aren't allowed anymore? You can play for a living, in a way.
I don't feel like a grown-up, to be very honest. And then when I see my friends who are my age, I'm 38, I think they're so old. You know, I have to say, some of them are so serious, and my life is never really routine in that sense. It changes. Every project is somehow unique. So no, I don't really consider me to be a grown-up, but at the same time, I find myself going more frequently to funerals. So you know, the generation of my parents, you know, they're now, you know, about 70 and up, and it's the time when more and more people start to depart and to say goodbye. So, I mean, how long can I claim to be a child? I don't know, you know. Well, my children are, you know, my son tells me, my 3-year-old, that he's older than I am. so let's see.
I guess you're all related in a way, but you, as far as I know, you once performed with Björk once on Icelandic TV. How weird or how wonderful or both was this experience? If it's true, I have no idea.
I think the disappointment with that experience was how normal it was. You know, she has that aura, and she is very unique. But you know, to play with her is really just like playing with any other very professional, very good singer, because she just wanted to rehearse a lot. We did something, I think, without a microphone, and it was completely acoustic. So yeah, the sad answer is that it wasn't life-changing. It was just it was a nice project, but she was just singing it like a good singer, like a Jonas Kaufmann would sing. Just wants to rehearse and do it as well as possible. There wasn't any kind of madness to it. There was no break from my normal routine. so I hate to disappoint you with it. And there was no mention of elves, because that's all, you know, that's all bullshit, of course.
You once said that you always try to bond with the instrument under your hands. How is this doable, and what happens if you are stuck with an instrument that doesn't respond and that just is stubborn in a way? Because when you're on tour, you can't take your instrument with you, your favorite instrument. You just have to take whatever is there and try to get ahead and get along. But what happens if you feel from the first 10 seconds, I am not going to be friends with this instrument, but we have to do a concert anyway?
Yeah, those are hard days. But that's just like waking up with a little bit of cold. You know, you just get on with it and you do your best that day, you know. But I'm such an idealist, and I kind of want every performance to reach to my ideal. Of course, they cannot all reach to my ideal. So I have always a very hard time letting go of that feeling, you know. But you have to somehow try. And the older you get and the more you have that experience, you know, the better you become at still producing something, you know. I had that experience in a recital before Christmas in the US, where the piano was like horrible, and the piano technician just couldn't do anything about it. You know, the technician was not very good, and there was no time to fix it. It was on the day of the concert, and you know, the technician tried to fix it, and it just got worse. and then it's like going to a horrible doctor who gives you medication that makes it worse. You know, so basically, I just had to suffer through it. And the hardest part is when people then come backstage and they're so happy with it, and you are feeling horrific about it. And then, how do you act? Are you going to be honest with those strangers and tell them that actually that was a horrible experience for me, thus ruining the experience for those people who are actually very happy and uplifted by the music? No, because I feel that would actually be a very selfish thing of me to do. If they are very happy about the music and I had a very difficult time playing it and just thought it didn't sound how I wanted it to sound, I'm still not going to rob them of their experience and kind of almost humiliate them by sort of opposing them like that. And then you have to give the white lie, and those are the hardest moments in my life. You know, when you have to pretend and you really aren't happy, but you don't want to sort of, you know, you don't want to hurt anyone or to offend anyone still.
And it's so funny that so many people really can't believe that it's such a critical point for piano players, the instruments they're playing on, actually, because I guess many people just think, oh, what the heck, take the piano and play. One piano is just like the other. You can play, so what's the problem? But it's completely not like that, and then it starts to be work, and it stops being.
Then it starts to be work. That's the key. And if you let go of your idealism, it becomes work, and then that's it. And then you don't care about the piano, and you just do the concerts, and you just play your forte, and you just overplay the piano, and just sort of crash through it. Exactly, but that's the point. That's the point that matters. You can never allow that attitude. You can never accept it. You have to, in art, you have to try to look for perfection, even if you're not going to attain it. But I think people forget that the piano is a machine that consists of something like almost 12,000 parts. 12,000, and it's handmade. It's it's hand produced by these carpenters, who are incredible, instrument builders. 12,000 parts that are susceptible to humidity, to temperature, to everything, and if the temperature or humidity changes 10% in the hall, the piano is absolutely affected. And so what people forget, and I always try to give credit to, is that there are these people behind the scenes who are the piano technicians who can really make life-changing difference for an event.
Did you ever get the idea in your head, I might be able to fix things myself, like Christian Zimmermann, who is famous and feared for getting his tools out and working at the piano? Or are you way too clumsy and fearing that you might lie at the side of the piano after 10 minutes because you just kill yourself with your tools?
Oh my God, I hardly have time to raise my own children. I can't tune my own pianos. That I don't know how Christian Zimmermann does it. I admire him. That's amazing. And his pianos always sound very much like him, obviously. But that's a dangerous path to go on, and you have to be sure that you have time for it. I don't currently. But it's also, it's interesting actually. I tend to like collaborations when I like my collaborators. So I work with piano technicians like Michel Brandies from the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam, or Thomas Hübsch from the Philharmonie in Berlin, or Thomas Lepple here in Hamburg, who I think are just fantastic. And I like each and every one of them for how different they are, and it gives me something new for every performance I do with any one of those. So it's the same with conductors. I can play Mozart concertos and I can conduct them from the keyboard. That's no problem. I could, even almost conduct the Ravel concerto I'm playing tonight, But I much prefer having someone like Antonio Pappano, or Klaus Mäkelä, or Santu Matias Ruvali, or Paavo Järvi, whoever I'm working with, to actually have that dialogue and that meeting of minds, because it gives me the opportunity for an outside new perspective that is very welcome when it comes from such a high place. So I actually tend to love the exchange of ideas, and that also goes with the technician. So if I would always be stuck with my own piano, tuning it, or only conducting my own orchestras, it wouldn't entirely be me.
Take me back to your past. What was it like? Were you the friendly but slightly lonesome boy practicing piano all the time while the rest of your class was out playing soccer and breaking each other's noses? Or what was it like wanting to become a musician on Iceland?
It's funny, yeah. I did both. I didn't break anyone's nose, to my knowledge. But I certainly played football until I was 14, and then I stopped playing football. And I thought I was really good at football, and I'm not sure if everybody agreed with me on it, I was almost never in the A team of my club, but I always thought I should be in the A team because I had a deeper understanding of the game. But I wasn't one to go into the tackles. I wasn't, and there was very much a bully kind of culture in that environment. I mean, it was like the boys who were most aggressive or always on top, in those days, when I was 13, 12, 14. I was never that guy. I was more the guy who was being bullied, to be honest. I had my good group of friends, but I loved playing piano. But the interesting thing, and maybe, because playing is the theme of the conversation, coming from Iceland, I don't come from a country of heavy piano tradition or music tradition, if you wish. And so there was no system in place for someone like me who has a certain amount of talent. So I was never pushed, not even by my mother, to practice. Never once was I asked to practice piano. I would just always want to play the piano, and my mother would rather say, go out and play with your friends, go do soccer, do something else, And I think that has very much been a part of me, because it was always coming from within, It might have meant that had I been forced to practice more when I was 7 and 8, I might have been better at a younger age, I only started to play pieces like the Tchaikovsky Concerto and Liszt Sonata when I was 14, 15, 16, which in the end is young, but it's not as young as some who are playing Liszt concertos when they're 12. I couldn't do that when I was 12. I just hadn't put in the hours for the instrument. But because of it, everything came sort of in a very joyful way, And I remember when I was 12 and 13, and I started to work as a paper boy, delivering the newspaper in the morning, very young. Come from a kind of not very rich middle-class family. And I would spend all the money I got for this on CDs, and it would always be piano CDs, And at that time, 98, when I was 14, 99, 15, 97, 13, they're starting to release a fantastic edition of CDs called The Great Pianists of the 20th Century. I don't know if you remember this. It was golden double CDs always, with about 100 pianists that some committee of Deutsche Grammophon and Decca and Philips and Sony or something had sort of, they were all working together
I remember,
on creating this kind of incredible piano sort of outlook over history. And I just bought everything I could buy. And there, in that edition, they had selected some of the best recordings of people like Benno Moisevich, Josef Hoffmann, Ignaz Friedman, Okov Sergei Rachmaninoff as a pianist. So these are all recordings from the 1920s and 1930s. And I started to really listen to those and started to then try to bring the sounds of that 1920s, 30s era into my own playing, with the piano at home. And then I started to practice and practice and practice and practice, mostly for sound, really. And I got better and better and started to play then all the big pieces and concertos with the orchestra, and it sort of started. But it was still relatively late if you compare it to people who grow up in Beijing or Moscow or perhaps Berlin now and London and New York. Those kids, if they have that kind of talent when they're 7 and 8, they're pushed into a system and they're a little bit produced, which doesn't mean they can't then turn into incredible poets and have a lot of playfulness to their lives. But mine was unusual in that way, coming from Iceland, that there was no system, and I was being told to practice less. But that became a part of it. And then I remember when I came to Juilliard when I was 18, and I was really craving to go to a big city like that, to New York, because I have never seen great production of opera like Metropolitan. I had never really seen symphony orchestras like they have in New York at Carnegie Hall. Really, I hadn't. Because that was in the 1990s and early 2000s when people did not jump on a plane just to see one concert in London and go back. No one did that then. People do it today.
More people living in one street block than on the whole of Iceland.
Exactly. And people today, they just travel to see whatever. They do everything they want. 90s and early 2000s, it was simply much more expensive or something, or people had different attitude to life. The globalization hadn't made everything so accessible. You didn't just go somewhere to experience one thing and go back. If you went abroad, it was like a 3-week trip that the family saved for, a year to do, So when I went to Juilliard, I really was ready to work like crazy at the piano, because I had already done all the things that you're not supposed to do. I had already tried lots of things that might be kind of illegal and sort of done all the things that you're not supposed to do. And I had already had my first and second girlfriend or whatever, and I had already drunk stuff that you're really not supposed to drink when you're 16. I had done the things that I really don't want my children to do. Mm-hmm. And so I and I had already spent too much time playing video games. I loved that when I was a teenager. And I haven't played video games since I was 18 and moved away from home, which is funny, because so many of my friends who came from different cultures and were really going through that kind of system of being pushed a certain direction by their mothers, mostly, sometimes the fathers, what they did when they were finally free from that influence was to start to experiment with the world, and they bought PlayStations, computers, and put in their rooms at Juilliard, in the dormitory, and they started to drink and sometimes had a hard time controlling that, and starting to do all the other things that you're not supposed to do. So sometimes some of them lost their footing a little bit, whereas when I was 18, I was almost like grown up, ready to work, but I also enjoyed it so much, and it was kind of a fun thing for me to catch up on some of the things that I maybe needed to catch up on. I remember the first year there I played all the Bartók concertos, and I learned Rachmaninoff 3. I did all the things that I had yet to do that some of my friends really had already done 4 years earlier.
What about practicing now? I mean, you're an established artist now. You could say to yourself, I'm quite good as it is right now, and practicing is just moving fingers, and the more critical and the more important part is taking place in your head anyway. So practicing is maybe even more thinking about music than actually playing it now. Is it like this, or do you actually need this physical experience, or is it more important now to think ahead about what you're going to do, and playing comes after, and later playing is okay, I know I can do it, I just have to think what's right?
It is physical still, and I think that if you want to be as specific as possible with the music and the way it sounds exactly, so I mean every phrase, every millisecond of it, if you want to have that kind of control to be able to improvise it so that your nerve ends in the end tips of your fingers respond perfectly to what your mind and your ears are bringing you in that moment, to make that connection, between fingertips and the head, to make it so seamless, you actually do need to practice quite a lot. You can get away with not doing it, and 98% of people kind of won't be able to tell the difference, but something will change inside you, and you will lose your idealism, and then you lose sort of a sense for why doing it, because then you just then you cease to be yourself, because what defines myself from anyone else, it's, and that goes for all of us, by the way, that it is the specifics, and how specific can you be, and by that I don't mean over controlling or trying to decide in the practice room exactly the millisecond of every single phrase of the Ravel concerto, not at all, it has to be improvised in the moment, but for that fantasy to happen, again, freedom has to be connected to discipline, so we go back to that idea. But yeah, that's always a big part of me. That's why I like to play Bach, because it's the same with Bach. You can't overdo a rubato in Bach. It falls and it becomes pathetic. But you also can't play it cool, because it's poetry. And that balance is the hardest thing in interpretation for me. And same with Mozart. Extremely difficult.
What about being able to, or not being able to practice? Is there some sort of phantom pain when you're not able, or when there's no way of you practicing? Can you stand not playing piano for a certain time, or do you actually feel it physically, like I haven't played for, 2 days, I'm going insane, I have to play now?
I can do it for a week. I tried it for Christmas. I was playing the last concert of the year with the Berlin Philharmonic on 21st and 22nd of December, so very late, and I came home and I just felt I owed my boys Christmas, so I just didn't play. And after a week, I just felt, okay, I have to play. That just came just like a flood, because for the first 4 or 5 days, absolutely fine, and I was just enjoying it. And then something happened inside me, and I felt, I need this, And then I started to play on 31st of December, Bach. But if I go longer than that, it becomes impossible for me, actually.
And you get strange.
I get strange, yeah, and my wife doesn't like me. I mean, she feels that I become tense, and I think it's true. It's like for some people, if they don't go to the gym, they can sometimes get sort of irritated, and some people, when they don't eat, they get hangry. Hangry. So it's, for me, I get a little hangry when I don't, when I can't, fulfill my appetite for the piano.
What's more fun, playing in a studio situation or playing live for an audience?
Depends what music. I mean, I think studio is amazing because It's something that I look forward to for a long time and I prepare for months. Every album I do is incredible amount of preparation for me. Whereas a live concert usually is something that's in a sequence of something, but at the same time, when you have that on stage, you know, these are just fundamentally different. It's like film and theater, you know. I think you need both. The studio is really the idea of your idealism and how close can you try to reach it at that moment in time. The concert is not, in the end, only about idealism, but rather about something that we missed in the pandemic. And I felt when I came back to the BBC Proms 2021 and played for 5,000 people in the Albert Hall, and you feel this communal aspect of music, this togetherness that it can create. It doesn't always create, but it can create. And the silence of a hall when you play something and you feel, and it's so fragile and it's just hanging by a thread, like Ave Verum Corpus or something, and you feel that the audience, everybody feels the same way. That's very rare in the world on any level, that everybody has a similar or same kind of, you know, way of being. To have 2,000 people sort of connect like that almost only happens in concerts like that. It's something you can't find anywhere else. You certainly don't find it here in Hotel Für Stille, you know, you don't have 2,000 people who are all on the same wavelength for any moment. But that can happen in concert.
But isn't it weird that the most important moment of a concert somehow is the moment of silence after the music has ended?
Well, I think it's interesting with concerts. And I love in the beginning of a concert, when you sit down, I think the first 5 or 10 minutes are quite important, actually. I don't study it like that, but when I think about it now, it's how you tune the ears of the people with the sounds you create in the beginning of a performance, you know. And if you start the performance just going out all extrovert, kind of, you know, tunes that. But if in the beginning stages of a performance, you actually manage to take the dynamic down to the most, if you get a fragile point early on in a performance, it completely changes the whole dynamic of the 2,000 people completely. And that's something that is so beautiful.
Do you play for an audience or with an audience, or maybe just for the one guy in the second row with the red shirt on? Do you make any,
it's very funny.
Differentiate it?
It's so different every time, you know. I'm always, at least, this is very selfish, playing for myself. Because I actually believe that, you know, if you are not inspired yourself and you're not absolutely loving the music, you can't make anyone else love it. That's the first thing. So in order to help someone else, you have to help yourself. But I'm also very much playing the dynamic of an audience. I can't help it. It's just the way I'm done, created somehow. So I love the people, you know, and I try to also meet them if I'm asked to, and do CD signings and connect with them, because I think it's a part of it. It's why we go to concerts. It's that connection. And I like to sometimes say, as you know, a few words before a performance, like I did in Hamburg. Said something like it, probably 3 or 4 minutes before playing, non-stop 90 minutes. You know, just yeah. But there's no simple answer. But I'm never playing as if there is no audience. That has never happened for me. I can't do that. Why would I then play for an audience if I want to pretend they're not there? I love the audience. And you know, and some people go very far. Arthur Rubinstein loved his audience and was always, and some people say they think about one specific person in the audience and they focus on that. Sometimes if I know someone is in the audience, let's say if I know György Kurtag is in the audience, of course I will be thinking about that. You know, I played a concert in Moscow just before the war, where I knew that Grigory Sokolov was listening to it on a secret link to Verona. Of course, when I was playing this concert, I mean, and Sokolov is amazing. When I was playing it, yes, I was actually also very much playing for Sokolov. You know, I couldn't help it because they had told me about this and asked my permission. But every occasion has to be different, you know.
Okay. There seems to be a thing with you and helicopters. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, the weirdest performance so far has you playing on a sort of a lake stage in Italy with a helicopter over your head, and you played Scriabin. And now recently, a few days ago, I saw you getting into and out of a helicopter in Iceland in a James Bond-like way for your video for performance. So what about helicopters and you, and what was your weirdest performance so far, apart from this having to play under a helicopter on a lake in Italy?
Well, like you say, that is the weirdest performance, of course. But that was actually something with an artist called Roman Signer, a Swiss artist, fantastic conceptual artist. This was almost 10 years ago now, it's crazy. And I remember Roman having this kind of attitude of playfulness. He said to me, you know, I love helicopters, I love fast cars, I love bombs, fireworks. He likes all the things that you like when you're a 3-year-old, you know. And that was very inspiring. Yeah, me and helicopters, I mean, yes. Those are the strangest performances. Another very strange thing I once did, and I don't want anyone to repeat, was I played the piano that was in flames. The piano was already dead, so this was like a cremation. I mean, the piano was completely broken. It was beyond repair, and I was doing a festival in Sweden, a chamber music festival, where the theme was forbidden music. So, music in the Third Reich, music in time of Stalin, music in, you know, also in times of earlier times, you know, music that didn't please the aristocracy, music as a political threat, one way or the other, or even music today, you know. And we put the piano in the middle of the woods in Sweden, and it, like I said, it was really beyond repair. And they put it in flames, and I played it, and I felt horrible. I really felt horrible, and I still feel horrible about this, even if the piano was basically going to the, you know, it was going into trash, you know. It was going into recycling. But we did it for the effect. It was a sad moment. But it was also a moment to remember that not to take everything for granted, and that we have classical music today, and we still have actually unbelievable amount of people, whatever anyone says, listening to it, you know. Whether in concert, the numbers are going up after the pandemic, but we have to also remember that in the pandemic, people started to listen to classical music much, much more than ever before, and no one's talking about this. That the streaming numbers for me and for basically all of my colleagues, they went up some 50% sometimes.
We met a few weeks ago at the Leishalle, at the concert of Igor Levit, and you were there just listening. Is it possible for you to just listen, or is there always a staff sergeant in your head shouting that you need to compare and review, and what would you do if you were in his situation now? Or is it possible for you to just sit in a concert and enjoy and consume and just be good with that?
It's a good question. Before, let's say if you ask me this 10 years ago or something like that, or even six years ago, I probably, if I was very honest, I would probably say that I was constantly comparing myself with whoever else I was listening to, and that was always the case. Not necessarily in a negative way, but just always analyzing and thinking and, you know, trying to understand myself and others. But now I don't compete so much anymore like that. I don't kind of have to, and so I feel much freer now when I listen to something like that. Was a wonderful recital, and he played all the pieces differently than I would play them, and I loved it. You know, there was nothing. I wasn't trying to create him in me and him. You know, because in the end you can't do it. So I felt very free when I listened to it, and I was very grateful for that moment. It was a beautiful recital. But really, that's changed because I don't have to prove that anymore. I have what I want in terms of my life in music, you know. But I didn't always have that. And when I didn't have that, I was much more frustrated, and I would analyze everything, and I would think, you know, in a different way. But now I simply don't have time for that energy. And it makes, I'm just trying to be very honest, it makes it much easier for me to. And maybe it's also just age, you know, I'm 38, maybe it's, you stop when you're in your 30s and probably 40s to try to expect everybody else to be you. You know, you kind of allow 1,000 flowers to bloom differently. You know.
Is it necessary or important to know things about a composer's life to play his music properly and straightforward and in the right way, or is it just I'll take the notes and I don't care about the rest? I guess I know your answer, but I wonder what it's like.
What if we look at it differently? Do you have to know everything about Pablo Picasso's life in order to enjoy his work? And the answer is no, of course. Same with Shakespeare. Do we have to know everything about his biography? No, but is it interesting? Absolutely. And can it change something about the way we put on these plays? Yes. Is it vital? No, it's not something you have to do in order to prove something. You can also do it without it, actually. And sometimes it's also nice to just free yourself a little bit from that element and just try to approach it completely on its own abstract terms, you know. So not to always put everything into historical context, but rather almost free yourself from historical context. That's a dangerous thing to say, and many people in classical music will hate hearing it, you know. But it's interesting, how can you be equally influenced by Glenn Gould and John Eliot Gardiner when it comes to Johann Sebastian Bach? You can't imagine more fundamentally different kind of players here. And I am, you know, and Marta Argerich, she doesn't play much Bach, but what she's played has profoundly influenced me in Bach, just to take one example. Do I need to know everything about Bach? Well, Bach is very interesting because we know very little about him. Have I read biographies of Bach? Of course, yeah. But everything we know about Bach is quite mysterious, and the written things about Bach and what he's written in letters is very often complaining about money or something so absolutely uninteresting, and then he's creating, you know, these sculptures of sound. So yes, you know, I'm not saying one way or the other, but I don't think you need at all to have any prior knowledge, just like you don't need to have any prior knowledge of classical music in order to go and enjoy a symphonic concert if you're coming from the street with no further experience of that form of music.
How important is it for you to pick a place to record your albums? I know that you prefer, that you're really very fond of Harpa, the concert hall in Reykjavik. Is it just because, I don't know whether it's you are able to get there by foot, or is it a special atmosphere? Because I could imagine artists also saying, I don't care, I need a microphone, I need a piano or my instrument, and the rest will come by itself. Why is it special?
I don't understand people who are like that, if I'm to be very honest with you. I mean, if you are recording on the other hand, if you choose to record, why would you not use all the options available to you? Like, why would you not use all the 88 keys of the piano when you play the piano? Or use the 3 pedals to one degree or another? Why would you not care about the acoustic that you're working in, the type of microphone, the placement of it, the post-production mix? It's all a part of everything, you know. Then you play your best, but that's the most important part, and, you know, by far. But there's immense creativity in the other parts of the process. And why would you not take part in that creativity, and that, why would you be arrogant to say that you don't care about it? I think that's a very defensive attitude, and it's not a very curious one in the year of 2023, to be very honest with you. I see the hall, like where I record, as an instrument, you know, and you play the hall, you play the reverb of the hall, you play with it, it affects how you play. And my hall where I record is a very different hall. It's not really a concert hall. It's in the so-called Northern Lights Hall of Harpa in Iceland, Harpa Concert House, and it has free seating, so you can remove all the chairs very easily. It doesn't really have its own acoustic. It's very neutral. It's more like a gym, has a kind of a linoleum or something on the floor, and then you can change the whole dynamic of the hall with these drapes in the sides of the hall, and you can really adapt the hall to whatever you want it to become, so it really becomes your instrument. And the microphones, it's just, you know, you can play incredibly well, but if they're not placed right, it won't be realized in the recording. So for me, when you record, if you record, why not be involved in all of it? How is it possible not to have a say in that?
You have this, I don't know whether that's the right word, you have this condition, as far as I know, called synesthesia. So you you see music in a way. You sort of experience different tones as different colors. Am I explaining this right? And if you experience, can you switch this on or off maybe, or enforce it in a way while playing? Is it actually colors coming out of the piano when you're playing? I can't imagine what it's like, because it's a situation I'm not in, and I have no idea what it's like, and whether it might be disturbing even sometimes, because there might be situations and moods where you think, I just want to play. I don't need all these colors on top of it. I just want to play the music. Or is it something that's really rewarding or friendly? What's it like? I have no idea.
The listeners cannot see this, but you're now dressed in a pullover, which has the left arm with blue and the right arm with green and some orange and more. But the different hands are actually in different color, which I noticed immediately when we started talking. And to me, your left arm, the blue one, is a pitch of F, and the green one is a pitch of E. And so that's just to give you one example. But it doesn't mean that when I look at you, I hear the dissonance of a second, F and E, like crashing into another. But it's more the way things are. Like if you ask me, what color is a clear sky? And what is the answer? It's blue. And we kind of all agree on that, don't we? So if you ask me what color is the pitch F, I say it's blue. And it's the same answer as to say the sky is blue. And if you ask me what color is the pitch G, and the answer is red for me.
But is it more like a knowledge or like an actual feeling, or you sort of hear things simultaneously? Like when you're hearing a note or a chord, you see a color, and if you see a color, actually, where do you see it? On top of the instrument? Or
No. I don't see the color. I don't see it physically. It's more an association, but extremely strong. So the association becomes so strong that it becomes, to me, the same logic as saying the sky is blue, F is blue. Okay. So it's not, thank God, it's not so that you play a G major chord and you have like a red filter over your eyes. If that would be the case, I would totally be in some sort of a mental institution, I think, because those kinds of colors in one piece of music, like Ravel concerto, would be totally devastating, actually. But it is an association more than anything else. I think that's probably the best way I can explain it. But as such, it's not just something you choose to associate, it's something that's so deeply inside you that it becomes logic, like the sky is blue. This table here is from brown wood, that's the pitch of D. So this table is in D minor or whatever. I mean, if there was a key for it, it would be D, and this here is actually kind of hardly anything. But if it would be close to anything, it would be close to the key of E flat here, this chair, But it's sort of like, this here is my little sweater here is beautiful off-white, which would be a sort of a specific sort of range within the pitch of C. But of course, just like the colors have a kind of range within, there's not just one white, there's a million whites. It's the same with pitch, and it sort of like goes with the actual pitch where you are in 442 pitch, or where you go up or down. That kind of affects it,
Your wife is a pianist also. Is there any sort of competition about who gets to the piano first? I mean,
we
you have several
pianos,
ones. But I don't know, maybe she has a favorite one as well, and you both have the same instrument as your favorite, and then it gets tricky.
She's a fantastic pianist, but she's not working as a pianist, and maybe that's a blessing to a degree, But she's working now she was a journalist as well, and did a lot of journalism for classical music on TV and radio, and we did some together actually. And now she's working as artistic advisor or planner of Iceland Symphony Orchestra. So she's actually working with symphonic repertoire. And with the 2 children and me being gone 200 days a year, she has almost, sadly, no time to play the piano. But we have a game at home. So whenever I sit down, wherever in the house, and I start playing this trio sonata by Bach, that Kurtak has transcribed for 3 hands. He dedicated it to me, Kurtak, this incredible transcription. It's on my last album. When I start playing it, when I start playing this, the game is, and it's always on, that she has to stop whatever she's doing, wherever she is in the house, and she has to run to the piano, and then her right hand has to join, at exactly the right moment. It's the funniest thing. But we do this, and it always makes us laugh, so just whatever random thing she might be doing. If she hears those sounds, she just needs to stop and run and play with me that Bach piece, Bach Kurtak. That's one way of having fun.
One of your awards, as far as I know, is the Icelandic Optimism Prize. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
And
true.
why did you get this? And are you sort of national hero now? Can you use the bus for free, or is there any rewards to it?
No, and we are a society where people are very, very equal. We don't use family names. Never Herr Ólafsson. You would never hear that, ever. And you are on first name basis with the Prime Minister and the President, and the Prime Minister is, I think, in the phone book. You can probably find her phone number there. This is amazing. You go into the swimming pool, everybody is in the hot tub together. It's one of the most even societies in the world in that sense. So no perks for being slightly known outside of Iceland, but the Optimism Prize came in 2010, and it was very interesting because that was the most difficult period in recent history in Iceland. We had a bankruptcy of the country, basically, in 2008. All banks went bankrupt. The whole business side of community just fell in 1 week. Every company, basically, they just sort of like a house of cards. And we had planned to make Iceland into a center of finance for the world, a little bit like Switzerland or Luxembourg, or commerce, or the city of London. And thank God it did not work out. It would have been a very boring place, the kind of financial center up in the north. But people had really high ideas for it, and they wanted the easy money, and everything seemed so possible in the years of 2006 and 2007. Cash was flowing like crazy. And then everything collapsed. 2009 was the worst year ever in my life and in the life of, I think, my nation. 2010, still horrible. We were having lawsuits, I think, with the UK and Netherlands that in the end we won, but if we would have lost them, my generation would be paying off the debts until I would die, basically, and the Iceland would never have any prosperity. So it looked horrible, and we had to redefine. We were looking inward as a country. We had to redefine who we are and what we want to stand for, and it's not international finance, or anything that goes with it, or a kind of a tax haven or anything like that. That's not who we in the end are. And people really started to go into another direction and associate and want to use creativity and the arts and all the unusual things about Iceland as what we might want to be known for. And so when I received that Optimism Prize in the year of 2010, when it just felt there was complete darkness over the whole country and people were fighting and the politics were horrible and everything was just exploding, still 2 years on after the crash, and we had no way out of it except through the lawsuits that thankfully we won. I got this prize, and it had that significance that Iceland wants to become something else. It wants to be known for the creativity and for arts and something. And so at the time it meant something. It was also the time when we decided to finish Harpa, where I record all my DG albums, which is in the end one of the best concert houses in the world. But we didn't have the money to finish it, and it was only half built in 2008 when everything crashed, and it would have cost, of course, a lot less to just tear it down. But we as a country, the Prime Minister of now, who was then Minister of Education, she was a very young woman, Katrín Jakobsdóttir, really decided with the mayor of Reykjavik, Hanna Birna, that we would finish Harpa, even if it was a crazy decision economically. It was one of the most expensive concert houses. But they finished it, even if we couldn't afford it. And that was a symbol of the Renaissance. And me getting this prize just before Harpa opened was also kind of a symbol of optimism. This is what we wanted. This was the direction that we decided to take.
And now you're a national hero.
No, I'm not a national hero at all. No. I don't think so. Iceland is just like everywhere else. You know, the arts matter, but so do so many other things. You know, but it's still an unusual place in terms of how many musicians and artists it has.
I saved the toughest question for last. Yeah.
Can I leave?
I'm sorry. Are you playing music or are you creating it?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, I told you so.
It risks being arrogant when you say that you feel like you're creating it, because I'm working with the music that someone else actually created, you know. I'm playing Bach, playing Ravel, playing Mozart, playing whatever I want. But in the moment of playing it, if you go far enough, you have to try to approach the understanding of the music as if you had created it. So you kind of enter this dangerous zone of when you're having your best moments on stage. Sometimes it can feel as if you have created the music, but the truth is I didn't. It's just like a great actor who goes and becomes King Lear on stage. If that actor is doing the right thing, he really does become King Lear, and really in those 2.5 hours, that's how everybody should feel, that he is them, he is him. It's not Shakespeare who created him. And that's the same with music, you know. And when I hear the greatest performances that I've ever heard, whether live or on record, when I hear Sergei Rachmaninoff play the music of other people, like Frédéric Chopin, when Rachmaninoff plays Chopin, he's not really following the markings Chopin put into the score on one day in the 1830s, whatever, you know. Chopin was feeling in that hour when he sent it to publication, and he wrote this mezzo piano here and this crescendo there, and this is andante grazioso as opposed to simply an andante or andantino, you know. You do something at one point in time. When Rachmaninoff plays it in the 1930s and records it, he's often going very far away from the score of Chopin. At the same time, it feels the most authentic Chopin I have ever heard. So it's a contradiction.
So you're sort of doing both in a way, playing it and creating it.
Yeah, it would be very safe to just say, oh, I'm only playing it, I don't, I'm not the creator, it's the composer, and you have to respect the score, and it's all there in the score. But I've worked with, in the Urtext edition, and you have to just be a humble servant of the composer. But these people, and there were very many of them in the second part of the 20th century who kind of like to say this and to gratify themselves by being so humble about everything. Have they ever worked with a living composer? Because I have. And when you work with John Adams or Thomas Adès or György Kurtag or whoever you're working with, those are the people I know. They are so open, and the score represents one thing, but then you change it from a performance to a performance. Thomas Adès, we did in 7 days, which is, I think, one of the most incredible piano concertos of the last 50 years. It's a very difficult piece. It's actually impossible for the orchestra, and also very, very difficult for pianist and conductor. And it's so specific, everything revolves around the number 7. So the metronome marking is, quarter note is, I think, 77 in the first movement. All the rhythmic units are in 7. Everything in the structure, it's all like mathematical genius. The number 7, it's very beautiful, and it's about the biblical, myth of creation. The 7 days of creation. And when we did this, and I had practiced so much for this, Thomas starts conducting a tempo that's not 77, and he wrote it, but we were in a hall where it didn't work, and it had to be faster or slower. And on it went, and the dynamics and everything, and the dynamics were so specific, and then we did something completely different. The same with John Adams. Were they not respecting their own works? No, they were just becoming their own works, and the work was being created there and then. And notes are being changed, and everything is being changed. So one little phrase marking is a moment in time, and it's beautiful, and it's very interesting, but it's not the truth. And I think it goes to the bigger question of what is classical music and why does it survive? It's music that allows itself to be reinterpreted by every new individual, which makes it a little bit different from some of the popular music, which is a bit more stuck in the original creators. Like the Beatles songs always sound better in the original than when you do a cover of them, which is how it is. That's not the same with classical music. It doesn't not necessarily sound the best when the composer plays it him or herself. It can become better 300 years later. If Bach would have played the Goldberg Variations on 2 consecutive nights in the Elbphilharmonie, I'm pretty sure he would not be playing exactly the same tempos for all 30 variations. I just know that, you know. And Beethoven and Mozart, they were the greatest improvisers of their time, and in a way more famous for that than for their composing. Do you imagine that Beethoven would sit there and just silently and dutifully play exactly the markings that he wrote when he sent the music for publication? I don't think so. Was he aware of what he had written? Yes, because he wrote it. It was inside him. But then the music has to be bigger than that. It has to transcend the rules, just like art does in general.
We're done. Thank you very much, and it's been a great joy, and I'm really looking forward to hearing you play the next time, and take care with everything that looks like a helicopter.
Thank you, Joachim.
And enjoy your stay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joachim.
Weitere Podcasts vom Hamburger Abendblatt finden Sie auf abendblatt.de/podcast.